Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Gravekeeper deck profile. So this deck is a really fun, now fusion-based archetype that actually summons out some really awesome stuff and is probably one of the coolest control-based archetypes in the entire game, and one of the oldest archetypes in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Going back all the way to Pharaonic Guardian, which was one of the very first sets ever created in Yu-Gi-Oh! So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below because if you have some awesome rewards, guys, like in your name description for every single video, getting a signed card in the mail, or even getting a Twisted deck profile every single month that you are a patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Spiritualist. So you might be wondering, how do we fusion summon in this deck? Well, this is how, right here. Her effect has the ability that during your main phase, if Necro Valley is on your field, then you can fusion summon one spellcaster fusion monster from your extra deck using cards from you control from your hand or field as fusion materials, which is really good to summon out your copy of Gravekeeper's Supernaturalist. We then play 3 copies of Gravekeeper Commandant, which is actually the only Earth Gravekeeper in the entire deck, oddly enough. This card's really good because it lets you discard it from your hand to be able to add 1 copy of Necro Valley from your deck to your hand. It actually was one of those weird cards that came out during the Force of the Breaker, I believe it was, that you could discard and then add the field spell of the respected archetype. But they made one for this, Harpies, I think Jurassic. Like there's some weird archetypes that got one, like Atlantean got one that had Legendary Ocean, but it was actually a part of that kind of series. We then play 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Spy. So I still think this card is really good in this deck because when it's flipped face up, you get to special summon 1 Gravekeeper monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your side of the field. This card can go all the way up to 2500 defense if you have Necro Valley on your side of the field. So it's pretty big and really good in the deck. Being able to replace itself just when it's flip summoned, and is an overall really good surprise card to set a card with a couple other cards on your side of the field. Some people think this card's a little bit slow, but I love it as a 3 of in this deck, so I will probably continue to play it as a 3 of. We then play a single copy of Gravekeeper's Assailant. The Gravekeeper's Assailant's effect is that when this card declares an attack while Necro Valley is on the field, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and change it to battle position, which is pretty good just to be able to change the monster your opponent controls battle position to be able to get through that card is just really, really nice. We then play 3 copies of Gravekeeper's Headman. Gravekeeper's Headman is really good too because when this card is summoned, you can target 1 level 4 Gravekeeper monster in your graveyard and special summon it in attack position or face down defense position, and you only use this effect once per turn. Now, something to note is this card is a level 3 compared to all the other ones being level 4, which is why we play a couple of Link monsters actually in the extra deck, because you just really want to have the added ability of Revival. We then play 2 copies of Gravekeeper's Recruiter. Gravekeeper's Recruiter has the ability that if this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 Gravekeeper monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand. We play a single copy of Gravekeeper's Descendant. Gravekeeper's Descendant is really good, like really good, because it's kind of like Hand of the Six Samurai, because it has the ability that it lets you tribute 1 of the Gravekeeper monster to target 1 card your opponent controls and destroy that target. So the card's really, really, really good to be able to just pop a card on the field. 1 copy of Gravekeeper Shaman. Gravekeeper Shaman is again a really good card in this deck because it lets you she gains 200 defense for every Gravekeeper in your graveyard, and then she negates all monsters effects that were activated in your graveyard except Gravekeeper monsters, and then while Necro Valley is on the field, your opponent cannot activate field spell cards. Also, field spell cards cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. So this card's really good just to be able to stop certain card effects, and is an overall amazing card. We then play a single copy of Gravekeeper Oracle. You guys might be wondering, why do you play this card? Well, the reason you actually play this card is because if you use it to summon your Supernaturalist, it's really nice because you can actually gain the attack or gain the levels times attack points with your Supernaturalist, which we'll get into in just a little bit. This card's really interesting. It's kind of like summoned like a Egyptian god card because it has the ability to contribute 3 monsters or 1 Gravekeeper to tribute summon this card, and then you can activate the effects of this card in sequence in the amount of Gravekeepers and or monsters that you use to tribute summon this card. If you just tribute 1, it gains attack equal to the mind level of all monsters treated to summon this card times 100, and then destroy all set monsters your opponent controls, or all monsters your opponent controls lose 2000 attack and defense, which is pretty good just to be able to help you OTK your opponent. If you put 3 Gravekeepers on the field, sometimes you'll tribute summon this card to be able to just board wipe your opponent with Gravekeeper monsters being able to attack into them. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we are going to be playing one copy of Double or Nothing because you play so many level 4s in this deck. It's so easy to go off with Double or Nothing and OTK your opponent with Utopia Double, because all you have to do is summon Utopia Double, drop a copy of Double or Nothing, or add Double or Nothing from deck to hand, overlay Utopia on top of Utopia Double, it goes to 5,000, swing, detach a material, drop Double or Nothing, and hit them for that 10,000 sweet damage to OTK them. One copy of Terraforming to search our copy of Necro Valley, one copy of Gravekeeper Steel. This card's pretty good too because it lets you target 2 Gravekeeper monsters in your graveyard and add those targets to your hand. This effect cannot be negated by the effect of your Gravekeepers of Necro Valley. One copy of Hidden Temples of the Necro Valley. This card is basically Vanity's Emptiness, which is really cool because it lets you activate only if you control a Gravekeeper's monster in Necro Valley are face up on the field, and neither player can special summon monsters at all. But if you lose a Gravekeeper, like if one of your Gravekeepers leaves and you don't control a Gravekeeper or Necro Valley, you have to destroy this card. We then play 3 copies of Royal Tribute. Royal Tribute is like insane and was at 1 for the longest time. But what this card does is if you control Necro Valley, both players discard as many monsters from their hand as possible. This card's really good because it just lets you make your opponent discard every single card in their hand that's a monster, which is just insane. This card's really good as a 3 of. We then play 3 copies of Necro Valley Throne, which is the searcher of the deck, which has the ability that you can add 1 Gravekeeper monster from your deck to your hand, or immediately after this card resolves, normal summon a Gravekeeper monster to your side of the field, which is really good just to be able to get your additional monsters on your side of the field or get you a search. We then play 3 copies of Necro Valley, which is the main card of the entire deck, which has the ability that it makes all your Gravekeeper monsters gain 500 attack and defense, and also neither player's graveyard can be banished. And also negate any cards or effects that would move a card from the graveyard other than themselves to a different place. So for instance, if you're going to use something like, for example, Access Code Talker, then your opponent cannot use Access Code Talker's effect because they can't banish a card from the graveyard to resolve its effect. So this card's really good as a 3 of to stop a lot of generic Link monsters nowadays. We then play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness because the majority of the entire main deck, except for some reason, looking at you, Gravekeeper Commandant, are dark monsters. So this card's really good just to be able to draw you additional cards in the deck. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps, which we play quite a few traps in this particular deck. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Necro Valley Temple. Necro Valley Temple is really good because if you control a Gravekeeper monster and Necro Valley are both on the field, monsters your opponent control lose 500 attack, and then once per turn during the main phase, if you control no cards in your spell zone, field spell zone, then you can activate a Necro Valley directly from your hand or graveyard, and if this card in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can set a Necro Valley spell or trap directly from your deck. So this card's really good at consistently bringing out Necro Valley to your side of the field. It is an overall really good card in this deck to be able to consistently make your opponent's gap between your monsters and their monsters 1,000, because Necro Valley makes yours go up by 500 and makes them go down by 500 with Temple. So basically, yours are gaining 5, theirs are losing 5, so there's a 1,000 point gap in between yours and theirs. We then play 2 copies of Imperial Tomb of Necro Valley, which is an amazing counter trap in this deck because it has the ability that when a spell trap or monster effect is activated while you control both a Gravekeeper and a Necro Valley are both on the field, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. So just basically a Solemn Judgment. And speaking of Solemn Judgment, we are playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment in this deck too, because it has the ability that it can say no to anything by paying half your life points, which is not that bad in this particular deck, especially when you're playing really defensive until you summon your copy of Spiritualist to OTK your opponent or Utopia Double. This card's really good in this deck because you're usually going to want to go first anyways to set your field up. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 2 copies of Gravekeeper Spiritualist. This card is really good in the deck. It has the ability that gains attack equal to the original attack or the original level of the materials used to fusion summon this card times 1,000. And then while Necro Valley is on the field, this card and any other card on a field spell zone cannot be destroyed by card effects. And then during your main phase, you can activate this effect that during the end phase of this turn, you get to add 1 Gravekeeper's monster or a Necro Valley from your card from your deck to your hand, which can be like the Throne of Necro Valley, it can be Temple, it can be any Necro Valley card that you need or any Gravekeeper that you need. We can play a single copy of AA Zeus. I'm still waiting on mine to come in the mail. I do have one on the way now. And this card's really good because basically when Xyz monster battles, you can just lay this on top of it and destroy all cards on the field. I don't go into it that much, so if you don't want to pay the whatever amount it is now, you don't have to. You can play another rank 4, but it's still pretty good to play in the deck to be able to just board wipe your opponent. But it does board wipe all cards on the field, which is pretty good and pretty bad because it has the ability that you can detach 2 materials from this card and then send all other cards on the field to the graveyard. So it's kind of like a really good 3k Exciton Knight. We play a single copy of Utopia and a single copy of Utopia Double just to OTK your opponent, like I explained earlier, by going into a 10,000 beat stick. 1 copy of Baguska, kind of just to slow the game down if you need to. Tornado Dragon to pop spells and traps, again, just in case you need to. Exciton Knight, because Exciton Knight can blow board, but you kind of want to be careful with Exciton Knight because of the ability that if you activate this while Necro Valley is on the field, it's going to destroy Necro Valley too. And then 1 copy of number 60. So number 60 can detach 2 materials to let you draw 2, and then discard 1, or be able to revive a monster from the graveyard as long as you don't have Necro Valley on the field. Or it also lets you double the attack of a monster on the field, which is pretty good. So then we play a single copy of Boral Sword because Access Code Talker just is not good in this deck at all because it banishes stuff from the graveyard and it can't do that with Necro Valley on the field. Appaloosa because it can get you additional negations. Unicorn because it can spin stuff. Phoenix to pop spells and traps. Cerberus to pop monsters. And a single copy of IP Masquerena because Masquerena can help you go into Appaloosa later on. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a really crazy deck to play with and really amazing that an old archetype like this has gotten so much support. Like when I think old archetypes, I think Toons because I think Toons are technically like the very first archetype ever created in Yu-Gi-Oh! And then you go to the Gravekeepers, which is the next like real like flushed out archetype that they made back in the day before they started making like chaos decks and stuff like that. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification, become part of the notification squad, and definitely tell what you think of this deck down in the comments down below because it's, like I said, a really fun deck to play around with and super, super old school. So anyways, guys, we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.